This unity, in my opinion, Mr Tusk, I have to tell you that very frankly, is at risk now. Instead of sending Mrs May back to London with no extension at all, or maybe with an ultimately very short one, a few days, a week, you give her 6 months. But 6 months, everybody knows that on the 31st of October, it's in fact too near for a substantial rethink of Brexit, and at the same time, too far away to prompt any action. That's the problem with the decision that has been taken. And I would not go so far as Corbyn here, who would call it rubbish, because he calls everything rubbish in the Parliament. But I fear that it will continue the uncertainty. I fear that it will prolong the indecision. And I fear most of all that it will import the Brexit mess into the European Union. And moreover, that it will poison the upcoming European election. Moreover, my fear is that it will make from this Parliament, we say that in Dutch, I don't know if you have that expression, a pigeon house, a dovecote, with British members flying in, British members flying out, and at the same time waiting on the substitute benches, a number of members of 14 other European countries. Banksy, colleagues, has already done work on this. He painted the house in Westminster as a house full of monkeys. He could be inspired to maybe make a second work, to paint this hemicycle in Strasbourg full of pigeons. And my fear, Mr Tusk, my fear is that with this decision, the pressure to come to a cross-party agreement, as Mr Cabal has talked about, disappears, has weakened the last days. And that both parties, Conservatives and Labour, will again, what they did already for months, run down the clock. And the proof of this was that the first decision the House of Commons have taken after your decision was to go in holidays. So really, I never thought I should say that in my life here in this Parliament, but maybe the only thing that can save us is Nigel Farage now. Yeah. Why? As you will hear today, he's already campaigning. He's already rallying with a new party, the Brexit party, catching up with the Conservatives in the polls, and the old parties, Labour and the Conservatives, risk to be wiped out during the European election. So, my advice to you, Mr Corbyn, is that if they are not stupid, both parties, they make a cross-party deal now, immediately, in the coming days, to avoid this imminent disaster. And finally, Mr Tusk, in the aftermath of the decision, you said something, and you have repeated it a few moments ago. You said we may avoid Britain leaving the EU. And I'm against, in fact, Brexit leaving the EU. But it's not our decision. It was a decision of the British people. So what my fear is that instead of killing Brexit, the decision could risk killing Europe. At least bog it down again for years, putting our energy in negotiations with British leaders like Mr Corbyn or Mr Johnson, who in fact, in their heart, despise Europe. And this at a moment when we need all our energy, to put all our energy in the reform, in the renewal of our European Union. And that is what we and you also should solely focus on as President of the European Council. And that spirit was, in my opinion, absent last week, Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you.
I understand party interests, but they cannot overshadow the legal reality. Mr Verhofstadt was heartily and energetically applauded by Mr Farage. This is a good enough reason for you, Mr Verhofstadt, to deeply rethink and reformulate your argumentation. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. This debate is now closed.